So hey guys, welcome back to the PlanTito Earl channel. I'm your PlanTito Earl, and this is part 2 of our plant scam vlog series. Part 2 of 2 actually. So the first part, I discussed the money-related scams. Now in the second part, we are going to discuss the plant-related scams. So let's get it started. So yun nga, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to the PlanTito Earl channel where we talk anything and everything about plants. And I'm your PlanTito Earl. So yun, this is already part 2 of our plant scam series. In part 1, I did the money-related scams wherein you were scammed for your money using plants. So you ended up not getting any plants at the end of the day. And then now for part 2, which is this one, we're going to deal with the plant-related scams. Meaning, you were able to settle money-wise and then you were able to receive a plant. However, the plant wasn't what you expected it to be when you received the plant. So let's go on to our first plant-related scam. One of the more common, and siguro this is highly avoidable, especially if you do your research, you ending up with a plant that is different from what you did. What you expected. One of the most common scams is, I want to call it the Monstera Scam. Meaning, and this applies for other plants din I just want to call it the Monstera Scam kasi siya yung medyo common. Lalo na in the past few months na biglang nag-peak yung interest ng mga tao sa Monstera deliciosa or Monstera in general. Now, always remember, kaya mataas yung pricing ng Monstera because they are not endemic to us here in the Philippines. Yes, we have some propagators and growers na, but it's still not as common as your other plants that are endemic to the Philippines. Kaya always expect that Monsteras will carry with them a high price tag. Kasi for the most part, they would most likely be imported. Kasi Monsteras are generally more endemic to South and Central America. And then, most of the things, a Monstera that get to us are imported pa from Thailand kasi they're able to cultivate it there. Now, one of the common scams in relation to this, in relation to the name of the plant, is the Monstera deliciosa and the tibatib or Epipremnum pinnatum. For someone who doesn't have, kumbaga, an eye for plants, you would immediately mistake the Epipremnum pinnatum, which is very much endemic here to us in the Philippines. You could easily mistake it for a Monstera deliciosa because it has the same traits. It has splits, yung mga punit niya, and it has fenestrations or yung mga butas niya. However, some scammers are quick to take advantage of this. Kakabitan nila ng pangalan na Monstera yung tibatid nila so that they can sell it for a much higher price. Like these two examples which I saw on Facebook Marketplace. One of them was selling this mature tibatib or dragon's tail for 1,900 pesos per pot, and the other one was selling it for 2,000 pesos per pot. And it's just one leaf. And they tagged it as Monstera deliciosa, which, if it really was a Monstera deliciosa, that is a fairly reasonable price for that plant if it were that size. But in this case, clearly it's not Monstera deliciosa. Now, I'm not saying that the Epipremnum pinnatum or the tibatib is, or kumbaga, it's not as worthy as the Monstera deliciosa. No, I'm not saying that. It's just that yung pricing kasi in general for plants now, it's a matter of rarity or how easily the supply can be availed. In the Epipremnum pinnatum's case, since it's endemic to us, you can have as much of a supply as you can, and it's fairly easy to grow and propagate. Meanwhile, si Monstera deliciosa, it has to be imported for the most part. So that clearly is a scam. So the best way that you can combat this, or you can protect yourself from this, always do your research before you buy the plant. Be familiar with the plant that a seller is trying to sell you. Make sure na tama yung sinasabi ni seller na plant name, and make sure na ikaw mismo confident ka na yung plant name is what it actually is para hindi ka ma-scam. And then also in line with that, also try to see the fair market value, I guess, or kung how much the usual going rate of that plant is. That's in relation to overpricing naman. So yun, so that's one of the first plant-related scams. We move on to the next, which is sick plants when they get to you. Now, there were two who shared this from Instagram again. Zachary shared on Instagram, yung nabili niya na was, it had mosaic virus na salum, a root-rotten birkin, and yung melanochrysum niya apparently had no roots when it was given to him. He did say na yung Melanochrysum was replaced by the seller, buti na lang. But the Selum and the Birkin, wala na. It was already beyond repair. So always check for those kinds of things. Then PlanTito Crunch also shared, it was his first time to buy, and he bought a Schefflera from a garden. This was not online, it was from a physical garden. And then seller didn't tell him that it had scales, and na-realize niya days later na. So yun, unfortunately, that's one of the things that you can't avoid. And then, yun nga, if you're still a beginner, always do your research para you can protect yourselves from these kinds of, kumaga, scams. And it was already too late for him to have the plant replaced. Apparently, wala na yung plant by now. As of time of recording, that's at least what he told me. One way for you to combat that, if it really arrived to you sick or may sakit siya, get in touch with the seller right away. As in, immediately. Huwag mo palagpasin ng 2 or 3 days. Yun na yung maximum mo. Just so that on the seller's part then, they can really attribute it to the plant itself nung it was shipped out or when it was delivered to the buyer. Hindi dahil sa conditions or sa care that the buyer was able to give it within that time period. Kasi that can also potentially be a scam for the buyer, for the seller naman. Na si buyer bigla kang babalikan a week later kasi apparently namatay yung plant niya. Who's to say na within that week, may mga maling nagawa si buyer dun sa plant. Kaya, as a buyer, if may dumating sa'yo na plant, always check the condition of it. And then, if you see something potentially wrong with it, get in touch with your buyer immediately. Yun. And then, this next scam is actually very common in relation to the one that Zachary mentioned earlier. This one naman is unrooted plants or plants that were sold or delivered pero wala pa siyang established roots. Now, I guess from watching all other YouTube vlogs, it's always important for you to make sure na the plants, as a seller, the plants that you're giving out are well established, and as a buyer, the plant that you're buying is well established. That can't be stressed enough. Kasi without roots, your plant is not going to make it. And I personally had an experience of that. I'm going to show you this guy right here. This is my Philodendron Dark Lord. Now I bought this guy in June, and I'm filming this vlog in September na. So you can just imagine how long it took. So no first month niya, hindi ko pa siya na-repot. Actually, I didn't repot it for 2 months. It came in a nursery bag, and then I just put it in a bigger pot. Di ko siya na-repot or anything. Kasi I was afraid, at that time, I was afraid of transplant shock. Kasi nung time na yun, hindi pa ako magaling mag-repot. Ang bigat pa ng kamay ko. Kaya madalas namamatayan ako ng dahon or worse plant pag nagre-repot ako. I was noticing na it wasn't doing anything for me. Hindi naman siya namatay, but hindi siya nag-thrive. This sprout right here, it has been here since I bought it, and up until this day, wala pa rin nangyayari sa kanya. So last week, I finally got the courage to repot it, and then that's when I saw, apparently, this guy is a top cut without any roots. Again, I'm not gonna disclose kung sino seller na to. I bought this guy online. Super konti lang wait, I'm gonna show you. Super konti lang ng aerial roots niya. If you can see it right there. I'll try to block that. Yan lang yung aerial roots niya. Wala pa siyang new root growth, apparently. So, kaya pala, walang nangyayari sa kanya for the past 2 or 3 months that I've had it. Actually, ang pinaka-major na nangyari sa kanya, nawalan siya ng isang leaf. About 2 weeks ago. So doon ako nag-worry. Yun yung trigger ko na, okay, I really have to check on this one. Kasi super tamlay niya. Wala siyang strength. Ano yung leaves niya, hindi siya hard. Ito yung youngest leaf, newly unfurled, I guess, when I got it. And then hindi siya nag-harden at all. It's already been 3 months. Walang nangyayari sa kanya. So now, I'm trying to root it in water with rooting hormone in the hopes I could still make this guy survive. And hopefully, ito mag-unfurl na to sa wakas after 3 months. So yun, so that's my only experience with scam, thankfully. But there were other cases of this. Actually, isa din to sa pinaka-common ngayon. I think this is brought about by the increase in demand nga. So suppliers are having a hard time meeting this demand. So sometimes they end up selling unestablished plants. And then one of the most common things that I saw, there were 3 of them actually who told me that they were sold unrooted plants. si Ginger Bee, Verde Manila, and Mika Plants, they all told me that they were sold unrooted jewel orchids. Now, the jewel orchids is starting to gain popularity because it's really cute. It's great. It's a great terrarium plant. It's usually compact and they have really wonderful venation and colors. They look really glossy as plants. And apparently, lately, nagre-release sila ng unrooted jewel orchids. So, once these unrooted jewel orchids get to the buyers, after a few days, they all die. And the same thing happened to all these three people, these three fellow plant parents who shared their experience with me. So I did a follow-up poll on this, asking people if it's okay to release unrooted jewel orchids, and I got a unanimous 100% saying no, it's not okay kasi it will die. And ganun nga ang nangyari sa kanila. And then another one naman, medyo nagiging common din siya. I'm also seeing a lot of this recently. Yung mga Monstera ulit, balik tayo sa Monstera kasi nga they're hugely popular and they're in high demand. That's why they're raking in high prices. So another experience about unrooted plants being sold was from Condo Plants PH. We had a very lengthy conversation on this, so thank you so much for sharing your experience with me. She bought a Monstera Deliciosa Thai constellation from a fairly popular seller. Now, I'm not going to divulge the seller, but this seller has, I guess, some clout in the Filipino plant community. But kahit anong gawin nyo, hindi ko i-divulge yun kung sino yung seller na yun. Kahit i-PM nyo ako, mag-comment kayo. No? Kasi I'm not in that position to ridicule or embarrass the seller. Kasi hindi naman ako yung naging victim nito. And nung dumating sa kanya, couple of days later, biglang nagluko yung leaves niya. It had a fungal infection. Only to find out na hindi pa properly rooted or established ang Monstera Deliciosa that Condo Plants PH got. And this, again, cost her a lot of money. We're talking 5 digits here. Kasi nga, it's a Thai constellation. So you can just imagine the frustration that Condo Plants PH had to experience when seeing this. So now, she's trying to recover or trying to revive her Monstera Deliciosa. As in, they ended up as roots na lang, root nodes. Thankfully, she's making progress. But yun nga, si seller apparently released unrooted or unestablished plant to her, which resulted to the plant decaying and eventually ending up as a stump. I had a similar experience, but it wasn't a scam kasi it was basically because of my care. Masyado ko na overwater yung big ass Monstera Deliciosas that I had. I'm gonna show you a picture of that. Na overwater ko siya, so wala, namatay din yung leaves niya. I was still fairly new back then, or I was still unfamiliar with Monsteras back then, so I guess it was a lesson learned in this case. And lastly, one of the last scams that we'll be discussing in relation to unrooted plants naman. This one naman is from a seller's perspective. The seller chose not to reveal his or her identity, so I respect that. So I'm not going to reveal the seller's identity. I'm just going to refer to the seller as the seller. So what happened was, this seller has an online shop, an Instagram shop, and I was able to buy from this seller before. And actually, during that time that I bought, it was from a Mind Game. What happened was, apparently, once the plants were delivered to the buyers, some of them were complaining to another person, not a buyer, from a third person, another person na hindi naman involved. They were complaining because apparently they were friends with this person. They were complaining to that other person. Let's refer to this as third person. Na yung nakuha nilang plants from this seller was not rooted. So, si seller was kind enough to actually offer or to deal with the buyers who got plants that were unrooted, because apparently it was from the seller's supplier na ganun ang nangyari. So, yung supplier ni seller gave the seller some unrooted stocks or unrooted plants. Kaya na-release ni seller without knowing na unrooted pala yung mga plants niya. And sa kanilang nalaman nung nandun na sa mga buyers or nung nabili na yung mga plants na yon. Yung nga, kasabay ako nung nung batch of plants na yon na na-release. Thankfully, yung nakuha ko naman, which was a Philodendron Plomanii, which I already swapped out, it was well-rooted naman and I didn't have any problems with it. Ang naging problem pa nun, biglang lumaki yung issue. This third person did something that was, I don't know, I'm just getting this from from the seller's perspective, or from the story of the seller. This third person apparently went live on Instagram, trying to expose the seller na yun nga, apparently nagbebenta siya ng unrooted, and parang it became a little scandalous in the plant community. If you're familiar of this, I think you know what I mean. Kung anong nangyari dun sa scam na yon. So, this ended up with the seller closing shop kasi na-stress siya, which shouldn't be the case whether you're selling or buying plants. Plants should never be the cause of your stress as much as possible. So, dumating sa point na si seller felt that he or she was scammed because hindi siya nabigyan ng opportunity to explain. Kumbaga, nagkalat ng unnecessary information to the plant community without even getting in touch with the seller first. Kasi ganun ang nangyari. Apparently, saka na lang nag-reach out si third person to the seller after si third person went live, and yun nga, nagkalat ng mga chismis, ng mga statements. Let's just say statements na yun. So, grabe yung stress level ni seller at that point, kaya nag-close shop siya. So, that's the kind of scam that you want to avoid, wherein hindi ka necessarily nawalan ng pera, but in the seller's case, siya yung nawala ng opportunity to explain his or her side. Kaya because nauna yung fire before the spark, kumbaga, nauna yung smoke before the fire. Let's all be kind to each other. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. That's why I also wanted to include this, because I really felt for the seller. I talked with the seller. We had a good talk then, and the seller was really passionate about plants. I can tell that the seller was really passionate about plants. Nahirapan lang ako kasi gusto ko mag-pronoun, pero I don't want to identify the seller as much as possible. But if you're familiar, please just keep it to yourself na lang. Kasi it's a done issue. It's a done issue naman eh. I'm just using it as an example wherein things can go out of hand and it will end up in cyberbullying, which we don't want. And apparently ngayon, cyberbullying is a crime that can be punishable by law. Those are the things, or those are the plant-related scams that you should be looking out for. So, how to avoid these plant-related scams is one, always research about the seller. If you're a buyer, always research about the seller. Yun nga, similar to what I mentioned earlier, see social media communities. If there have been bad reviews about the seller, check yung mga reviews niya, yung mga previous posts niya, yung mga previous buyers niya. If the feedback is good, then you're confident in it. And then always research about your plants, starting from the name of the plant or the kind of plant that is being released, the potential diseases or pests that this plant can carry, so that you will know how to address it if ever that situation presents itself on you. And the care tips on how you can care for this plant so that at least hindi ka mahirapan. It won't cause any stress with you. And then also, this one I'm kind of iffy about, but given these current circumstances that we're undergoing, it's always to check the roots of your plants as you receive them. Now, again, I normally wouldn't recommend this kasi that would give a little bit more stress to the plant, especially kung galing pa siya kaka-transport lang tapos i-repot mo. So what I usually do is I let it acclimate for ideally, I'd let it acclimate for about a week before I change pots or repot the plant. But in this case, if you really want to make sure, if you're kind of doubtful, parang yun na naging mantra ko ngayon, when you're in doubt, repot. Just to check the roots. You don't have to change the pot or the potting medium that it came in. Just unearth it, check the roots, and if it's okay, if it's well established, just put it back there, and then treat it with root hormone para mabawasan yung transplant stress niya and yung overall stress that it had to go through before it got to you. So now I'm a little more confident when I have to transplant. Personally, I would recommend Anaa. It's a really effective root hormone for me, at least for me. I tried Hormex before, but I find that it's not as effective as Anaa. So you should definitely check it out para at least hindi ka na maging matakot na mag-repot or to check on the roots of your plants when it gets to you. Or on the other hand, try to ask from the seller beforehand, before releasing the plant, for pictures of the roots of this plant, or maybe a video or a live call, just so that you can be assured that this is a well-rooted, well-established plant that you're receiving. And lastly, get in touch with the seller right away when something is wrong. At least maximum of 3 days. Why do I say 3 days? Kasi a lot can happen kasi in a couple of days when it comes to plants. And on the seller's part din naman, to protect them as much as possible, if you're a buyer and if you find something that's going on, something wrong that's going on with your plant, immediately report it to the seller. Wag na kayong magpatagal-tagal. Kasi it might end up na baka it's because of your care or what you did to the plant na nag-cause ng harm na yon to the plant. So when you see initial signs agad in the first or second day, immediately report it to the seller para at least may leeway ka pa or medyo mas okay ka pa na to ask for a refund or return or exchange the plant that the seller was able to give to you. But it's actually protecting both of you both you, the buyer, and the seller. So para yun nga, hindi ka ma-blame na baka kasi at least mas maging malakas din yung laban mo. Na lalo na if you report it right away within a day or less na may something wrong with it, hindi siya properly rooted and all that, or nag-yellow na agad yung leaves as compared to the picture that that the seller sent you, biglang yellow na agad yung leaves when it got to you. Don't let it last kasi baka mapunta sa iyo yung blame and hindi ka makapagpalit ng plant or hindi ka maka-request ng refund or however appropriate action you think would be necessary for that plant. So yun, so wag niyo nang patagalin pa. So yun, thank you so much guys for bearing with me again for part 2. These are the plant-related scams. I hope you were able to learn something new today about these plant-related scams. There could be more scams, so please do let me know in the comment section below. And I hope that since you now have this information, you'll be more confident and you're better armed when you're trying to buy plants so that you can be more assured na hindi ka naging victim ng plant-related scam. So, yun, thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to follow me on social media. I have Facebook and Instagram. If you haven't, please do subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button if you did like this video and found it very helpful. Comment down below if you think there are other scams that I may have missed out. Do let me know and hit the bell for notifications. So yun, thank you so much guys for tuning in and I hope you have a great day and I hope na hindi kayo ma-scam ever because I know it's the worst feeling when you get scammed. So there, thank you so much guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.